All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for
Hello,
tuning in.
everyone.
How are you doing, Luke?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Friday. Or Saturday for you?
Saturday here, but going strong. I'm in Bali right now, so a
Ah,
little bit later than you, but it looks nice and sunny there.
yeah. Where's everyone else from? Let us know in the chat. We've had a couple of workshops now. This is our third episode, and in each of our episodes, we've had some people tuning in from countries I've never even heard of. So it's pretty cool to see where everyone's tuning in from.
Amazing.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple of seconds. I can see that more people are joining, so we'll give them some time to hop in. Oh, someone's from
Okie
South Africa, Oklahoma City, Italy, St. Lucia, or is it St. Lucia?
St. Lucia, yeah. Wow,
Ah,
been
Netherlands.
there a couple times.
Someone's from Germany, but they're currently in Portugal.
And no one from the Eastern Hemisphere yet, so I don't know if anyone's doing a late night yet.
Poland, Philippines, Norway. Wow.
The Philippines, okay, someone's up late.
Ukraine. This is awesome.
Nice.
Australia. Okay.
Must
I
be must be late then.
Yeah. Is it is it summer there right now?
Yeah, it's probably going into summer.
Mm. I think we can go ahead and get started. Just to do some quick introductions, my name is Debria. I'm from the Lexar team. Thank you all for tuning in to our virtual workshop series. Like I mentioned earlier, this is our third episode. This was a series that we created to provide access to free education around photography, filmmaking, and soon gaming to the Lexar community. We have a wonderful cohort of Lexar Elite team members as well as Lexar ambassadors. And so we partner with them to bring this series to life. I'm joined by a wonderful guest today, Luke. Thank you so much for joining us to share your expertise on photography, editing, and all of that. I'm going to go
Thanks for
ahead and
having
pass the mic to you to introduce yourself and kick off the workshop.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. I've put together a little presentation where we'll go through a bunch of different things. I have a bit of background about me, the gear I use, my workflow in the field, sort of my techniques I use, and then we'll dive into Lightroom, which is the program I use to edit my photos. And we'll have a bit of a dive into a few different images that we can work with. And then after that, there'll be a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that pop up during my presentation, just put them in the chat and Debra will pick a few, or we can try and cover them all. And there'll be some time at the end for that. So yeah, I'll get started. So a little bit about me, because some of you probably don't know my background. I am from the UK. I grew up in a very small village in the countryside in the south of England, in Surrey, and I didn't really have much experience living in a city, being in a city. But I went to university. I studied economics, and then traveled and worked in London in finance for around 4 years. Never had any artistic background or anything like that. But one day I bought a camera just for fun, a very cheap, small camera. I think it was a 1300D Canon. And I just did it as a passion, as a hobby. I took it to work every day, and after work in the evenings, I used to travel around the city, taking photos, mostly in the evening to give it that kind of moody vibe, which some of you who have been following me for a while now would have seen some of my older work was very dark and shot often at night and in the rain, which gave it a real atmosphere. And that really became most of my free time. And I got really into editing at the same time as that, using Lightroom back in the day. And it was just a fun time, like exploring and experimenting with photography and editing. I then took my first kind of vacation abroad with my camera in the States. I went to New York, and that kind of really brought home my love for capturing urban landscape and also people. So if I skip through a couple of slides here, we can see this is the kind of work that I was capturing originally, and I wouldn't really say work. It was more just my hobby, my fun, my kind of pastime as such. But it really was sort of the basis for my now career, and I tended to just focus on cities. It was then when I went to Iceland, and this was a result of Instagram actually. I met a couple of guys through Instagram. We had like a little chat group, just other photographers, and Benny and Norris, and they invited me to Iceland with them. I had never really spoken to them, even on FaceTime. We never even called. We just texted, and I met them at the airport, and we spent a week in Iceland, driving around. There was no drones back then. It was just cameras, and it was a really incredible experience, and it opened my eyes to seeing the beauty of natural landscapes and capturing uh, things in nature rather than just in the city and being out in the wild really helped to open my eyes to that kind of side of photography. And I'll skip forward here, and you can see these are images that I shot on my first ever trip to like a natural landscape. And I think this is where I really found my calling because there was something very freeing about being in the wilderness, and especially back then in Iceland. I mean, it wasn't so long ago, it was 2017, I think, but it wasn't as busy, and it was just a really cool place. And a lot of these images that you see are very familiar probably now, but back then, they weren't as well known and people hadn't really explored a lot of these places before, which kind of gave it that even more of an appeal. And I hired a camera for this. I didn't take my Canon. I hired a Sony A7R II and didn't really know what I was doing with the settings and things like that. But I just had everything on like F11, so everything was super sharp, and they look sharp here, which is nice. But it was mostly about the experience and really enjoying myself out there in nature. And still some of my favorite images to this day, and really loved the place. I then took a short sabbatical from my job in 2018. I realized that I just needed some time out from work. I just finished a lot of finance exams, and I basically took my camera to Australia. I took a one-way flight, and I thought I might be away for 6 months. And then I ended up staying out there. I basically never went back home to London, or at least to work in London. I carried on traveling, and I built up my portfolio. My audience expanded. It was slow and steady at the first, until I really kind of focused on growing both my work and my audience. And I was posting every day. Some of you might have noticed that I was really just trying to find unique, interesting compositions and places to go that hadn't been so explored, and showcasing this to the world because it was really a fun time, like being in places that are lesser known and showing people and who are also really excited to see this for themselves. So that's kind of how my career started in photography, and here I am today. So in terms of a professional background, I began my kind of photography career when I started selling images to stock sites. So I would capture images all over the place, and then some of my favorites or some images that were requested by stock sites, they would kind of pay me a small commission. It wasn't massive money at the time, but it really helped to put a kind of thought into my head. I could maybe make a career out of this, or at least enough money to pay for my travels while I'm not working, kind of back home in London. So once all my kind of year of traveling had finished, I came back to the UK just for a little recoup, and I started reaching out to some brands in the UK, like alcohol brands and small outdoor retailers and things like that. And I took some products with me to Iceland and Norway, and I Lofoten. We did some shooting there, and kind of shot some actual campaigns where these images were being used in kind of social media and in their marketing material and in magazines and things like that. And that kind of elevated it to the next step of, hey, I'm actually shooting for like an actual brand now rather than just stock images. And it kind of kept going from there. I worked with so many cool brands now, like Mercedes and tourism boards across the world. I've worked with Iceland, Faroe Islands, the USA. I've been to Kazakhstan with a tourism board, and it was really a result of me just kind of pushing myself into nature and trying to capture unique places, and that kind of caught their eye. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel and call that kind of my career now. I've also had some support from ambassadorships, brands that I'm kind of partnered with, who I love their product, and then they kind of support my travels. I've been an ambassador for Adobe, Color Pro, Tamron, who make lenses, and of course Lexar, who have supported me for a while now. And I want to kind of shift my focus somewhat from constantly traveling because it's been almost 7 years now. I've been on the road living out of a suitcase, and I'm planning on spending my time split between shooting and then also education. I love this kind of aspect of photography because I can inspire other people to go out and shoot. And if they're picking up the camera for the first time, or even, a seasoned shooter, capturing images or showing them how they can better their photos through photographic techniques or editing really makes me happy. I mean, I love to see people produce better work and get excited for their passion. So that's kind of my goal now. These are some of the images that I've shot on campaigns. So bunch of car shoots, alcohol. We got a tourism board, hotel collaboration up there, which is a really cool one in on the Red Sea, which was awesome. Watches, that kind of thing. Um, it's kind of similar in style to my landscape images in terms of the editing and the grade, but it's obviously very commercially focused. But hopefully you guys can see my kind of tones coming through into these images as well. I wanted to just touch on my most memorable project, which was in Namibia. I was shooting a campaign for Tamron. It was their new 150 to 500 lens. It's a telephoto, and they sort of gave us a budget and just said shoot whatever you want, like a cool film, and that was just the most awesome project ever because we have so much flexibility. We traveled around Namibia for 14 days. We started off with sort of a self-drive safari, which sounds kind of basic, but it was incredible. We didn't get like a guide or a ranger drive us around in a Jeep. We literally had our own car and we drove through Etosha, which is just like a massive open landscape with wildlife everywhere. And they're so used to people driving through now that they don't even run away. They just kind of chill next to you, and you can just capture whatever you like. And it was really eye-opening because I get to witness wildlife for the first time. And my friend Kyle, he was laughing at me because I was just telling him to stop like every 2 minutes. There's a zebra, there's a I don't know, a giraffe just hanging around outside our lodge. And obviously, I'm fortunate enough to have done these things, but it's just an incredible experience. And I think if you ever get the opportunity to go, it's an incredible place. And that really got me into wildlife photography as well. I bought the 400 2.8 a year after, and as you can see from my work recently, I've been capturing wildlife all over, even in Antarctica, and it's just been an incredible experience. And my favorite of all time was, and the second half of that trip, we were in the deep desert in Namibia, and we're about 100 miles away from any sort of settlement or anything like that. So there's absolutely no lights in the sky or anything like that. And you could just see the Milky Way so clearly above the sand dunes. It was kind of very mind-blowing. You know, you don't get that even in rural America or Iceland, even to the same extent that you do in such a remote location as this. So if you do go, make sure you look up at the night sky when you're out there because it's really incredible. These are some of the images I shot out there. We made a film, but we shot loads of stills as well, of course. And yeah, you can kind of get an idea of the landscapes that we can see out there. And this was from one of the evenings with the stars. The Milky Way hadn't risen yet. This was just moments after the sunset, but the sky got so dark so quick you can kind of see the stars up there. But it really was incredible. I don't want to go too heavily into the gear I use. You guys can always ask me after the call. You can drop me a message if you have any questions on gear. But I shoot with so many different lenses and a variety of different sort of drones and cameras. But I guess what's most important is to just use a lens that uh, you're going to use the most often. And it's probably going to be something like a 24 to 70 equivalent. And I use the Sony A1 as my main body. And as you can see there, this is the massive 400, which doesn't always travel with me these days. I traveled with it in my backpack for almost 3 years. And now I'm getting a bit of shoulder pain, so I'm leaving it at home here and there. But yeah, just try and focus on a couple of lenses at most because um, you're always going to want to have the camera with you, and there's no point bringing so much gear if you're not going to want to take it out with you on a day trip or something like that. Want to touch on obviously the partnership with Lexar. I've been with them for about 5 years now, which has been incredible. They are like a global leader in storage. They have a bunch of different storage products from SD cards to SSDs to CF Express cards and a bunch of different hard drive storage that you can have in your home office and things like that. I began using their SD cards and then micro SD cards for my drone. And then with the A1, I switched over to CF Express Type A because they're like huge capacity and very fast. So yeah, there's a few reasons why I sort of chose to partner with Lexar, why I kind of trust them with my camera, my images, and I'll jump into that in a moment. These are some of the images I shot over the years with Lexar. You can see it's gone like a massive technological kind of leap over the past few years with their cards. We started with the 128 gig SD cards, which it's still pretty sizable, but they jumped up to 256, and then out came the CF Express cards with 160 gigabytes. Then it was 320, and now I'm kind of just using 1 terabyte cards because they can fit my A1 raw files. It fits about 20,000, which sounds a lot, but if you want your whole trip kind of covered and you shoot maybe 5,000 images and a lot of 4K video, then it does kind of fill up. So it's just a nice sort of safety net there. And obviously here's the SSD that I use as well. Um, with SD cards, I just want reliability. I want speed, capacity, and sort of the backup whole ecosystem there in place. I think my main worry with SD cards is if they fail. That's the biggest no-no for me. So I think having a brand that you trust. I mean, there's knockoff brands and things like that, but if I'm shooting a wedding or an important client project, then it would be heartbreaking if my cards failed either on the shoot or when I went to back them up. So yeah, I've never really had a problem with Lexar, and it's been a great few years. And I do shoot to 2 slots on my camera. Like if you do have a camera that supports 2 cards, I would definitely use it. I've known a ton of people that only shoot 1 slot, and then something's gone wrong. Either they've lost the card itself or it's broken. So if you have the opportunity, do shoot to two slots, especially if you're shooting weddings, because if you lose a card, then that's going to be the worst feeling ever. Um, I do make sure to back up 3 times, so I'll do a shoot. I'll have it on the camera in the SD card. I'll have it in my portable SSD, and then I'll put it on to my laptop, like before heading home or anything like that, just so I have like a triple backup. And if you're something I'm pedantic about is if I'm traveling on the plane and I have my carry-on and I have my laptop and my SSD and my cards in the camera all in that one bag. If you lose the bag, it's gone. So either back up to the cloud before the flight or put your SSD like in your check luggage because then you have like two places to. Anyway, that's the way I do it. And then when I'm home, I just put it on the cloud as well. I was going to show you me shooting on my A1, just like a huge burst, but you can't hear the camera because it's so silent. So I just tested now. I did a around 115 shot burst. Took about 5 seconds, so it's shooting 20 images a second without buffering, which is pretty cool because I don't think there's going to be any scenario where you're going to want to shoot more than 100 images in a row uh, at one time while holding the shutter. So I think basically it's got to the point technologically, especially with Lexar, with these cards at least, where you're basically never going to be in a situation where your camera's buffering. And I remember, on the early cards, whatever brand it is, it was a problem if you were shooting wildlife because you shoot 10, 15 images in a burst and it would be like, duh, duh, duh. And I remember on my Nikon that it was having that issue because the cards couldn't keep up. But now technologically, we've kind of surpassed that, which is great. Um, I do want to show you my import process, kind of how I then take those images from the cards into Lightroom and how I cull those. And then we can dive into some editing as well. So I think what we'll do is I think this is why you're all here. You want to look at some editing. I will do a walkthrough in Lightroom of sort of 6 to 8 images. I'll talk about why I shot the photo, why I use certain settings, and then I'll try and do sort of a very brief edit. I wanted to touch on a range of images so that you guys could have uh, a bit of breadth in the techniques that I use. And it's not going to be a complete edit. It won't be perfect. I mean, I will spend a couple of minutes on each image, and usually it might be 20, 30 minutes on a photo if I'm sort of doing it for Instagram or for a client or whatever. But I think it would be great to show you how I kind of implement a few techniques. And then, yeah, if you have questions, please do drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer those. So we'll dive over into Lightroom actually now. Okay. And the first thing I'll do actually is show you how I would import images. So say this, I just shot a burst shooting at the wall there just to test. I can drop these into Lightroom. What I want to do here is add to collection, and then you can choose the collection that you're importing to. And usually I'll just create a collection here and I can sort it into all my travels and things like that. This time I'm just going to put it into quick collection. So I'm going to click that quick collection there. And then this is the most important step that I tend to implement at this stage is I make sure to build previews one-to-one and I build smart previews. And the reason for that is if you lose your raw files, you've still got a preview to edit from and you can export it and it still looks almost as good as the raw image. It's just kind of like a low res preview, but because you're building a one-to-one preview, it's essentially almost a raw file, and it's got a lot of data for you to work with. But the main benefit for me is when I go to edit, is Lightroom is very fast. A lot of people I see, I look over their shoulder and they're editing, like friends of mine. They forget to tick this box, and then you're cycling through each image, and it has to load all the data for that image before you edit it. So it's kind of like slow when you're clicking through on Lightroom. So it's just something to be aware of because I hate a laggy editing software, and this just gives you a really clean experience to quickly go through and cycle through your images when you're doing that. So I'm just going to cancel that import. And I wanted to show you then how I would cull, which means how I'd get rid of images that I don't want to keep anymore to save space on my hard drive. I mean, if you shoot 20,000 images on a trip, you don't really want to be keeping hard drives full of images, I guess, or at least you can select images that you then want to edit. So, for example, if I have this Antarctica series that I shot, I have a bunch of images here. As you can see, it's very quick to sort of cycle through. There's no loading, which is wonderful. Um, and something I also do is I hide the histogram up here because that helps to speed up Lightroom as well. Um, what I tend to do is I'll quickly go through each image and I can rate it either 5 or 1, or you could rate it however you want. But for me, if I rate it 5, it means I'm keeping it. So, and 1 or no rating at all probably means I'm just going to bin it off. So I will rate, let's say I want to keep the penguins. So I'll press 5, 5, 5 on a bunch of these, skip through 5 on that one. And then imagine I've gone through all 500. I'm just going to filter by rated. And then I know those are the ones that I want to keep. So I could just go ahead and edit those. Or I could filter by unrated. I can select all of these. And then I go to all photographs and I can right click and remove photos. And if I remove photos, I can then click delete from disk. And what that will do is it will just clean it off your hard drive completely, and then you no longer have those raw files clogging up your Lightroom, clogging up your hard drives. And it's a really nice way to just keep things kind of organized, because if you have so many files hanging around, it's going to get a bit complicated. So I'm going to dive into some editing now, and then we'll see how this goes. So this first image here is an Arctic fox. It doesn't look particularly incredible right now. It's just a very nice image to show you a few techniques. Uh, this was in Iceland in the northwest, in a national park, and we had these beautiful fox cubs that were just had a little burrow outside of our tent, which was incredible. And I was shooting on the 400 2.8 lens, and it was essentially a handheld shot, of course, and focused on the eye. As you can see here, if I go into the editing pane, the eye is pretty sharp compared to the rest of the image. We've got this beautiful blurry background, which we always want. And then what we're going to do is, first of all, crop the image. So I'm going to just move this over here, crop that. So 4:5 is the default crop for Instagram. And then what we want to do is probably just add some contrast and raise the shadows somewhat just in his fur. My goal here with this image is to remove some distractions from the image, get the green color to the right kind of tonal balance that I want, and then perhaps add a bit of dynamic light to the photo. And we can do that through a bunch of radial filters, some gradients, and then something I often do with wildlife is I will adjust the animal's eye. I will try to make it a bit brighter, maybe a bit more colorful, just to bring it out some detail. So what I might start with actually is removing some distractions, things that I find shouldn't really be in the image. So this kind of spot here, or this bit of white behind his ear, and that hasn't done a perfect job, but I think for the sake of this presentation, that's fine. And even this bright white area, this leaf here, it's just annoying me, and maybe this stalk. And I know these things seem pedantic and small right now, but they just help to just clean the image up. You can see straight away the before and after. It just helps somewhat. This bit of white on his fur there, that can go. And now we have a much cleaner image. I'm going to add a bit more contrast, and then we'll go into color mixer. Now, I'm not going to use every single tool for every single photo because we'll run over, but the main sort of point that I'm looking for in this image is these greens. So it'll probably be a mix of orange, green, and yellow, the colors here. The rest of the colors are not in the image at all, really. We've got a little bit of blues in his fur, but not really. We can maybe make that a bit more shiny, but we'll dive mostly into these kind of orange, greens, and yellows. There may be a bit of purple here as well, so we'll just play with that just a little bit just to see if it changes anything. If I change the saturation, you can see nothing is actually really doing anything. So that means we don't really need to worry about that color because it's not really present at all. Um, so let's go to the yellows. You can see there's just a little bit of fur here that's yellow. If I adjust that, I'm just going to bring it back to match the rest of the color of his fur. And then we'll do oranges just to see. And you can see here, there's just a bit of orange there in his fur. We can add a bit of color there. And it's mostly going to be about these greens, obviously. So we'll dial back the saturation a bit, just so it's not so prominent. Maybe I'll just darken them a bit. If I go too bright, it might look too kind of uh, energetic, and we can adjust then the hue to match kind of our style of green that we normally work with. And for me, that would be just like a slightly warmish. You can see this green here is more tealy green. Doesn't really fit my style of image. My feed doesn't really look like that. So we're just going to go a slightly warmer green here, something like that, and just make sure the saturation is looking good. I think that that color looks nice for me. I then want to focus maybe on some detail just to make sure we got the thing sharp. I'm going to mask it. So what I'm going to do here is hold the Option key on my keyboard. It might be the Alt key for Windows users. And I drag the masking. And what this does is shows us what area in the image is being sharpened. And I don't want the whole sky, the background, all the grass to be sharp. I just want him to be sharp. So I boost the sharpening there, and you can see if I get rid of it completely, it's a bit more flat. If I put it fully up, it's a bit sharper. It's just a nice little technique there for wildlife, just to make the fur a bit more interesting. And then I might do a little vignette around the image here to make it a bit more moody, just so we've got some darkening coming in here. What I don't like is this kind of dark area up top, which will change in a second. We could obviously add some color grading and things like that, but for the sake of this image, I think it looks quite nice. It's maybe a little warm throughout the photo, so I could just add in the midtones just a slight little bit of blue here, just to cool it down just a little bit. I use those tools just to help kind of balance out the colors there. Two more things I want to do to this photo. Now, the eye is looking very boring, and the sort of top half of the image is a bit dull. So first off, I'll press M on my keyboard. I'll drag in this gradient, and I'm going to brighten up the image. So instantly, we're seeing like some light coming in. The image is looking a lot more interesting, and we can even warm it up if we want to sort of pretend as we're getting some sunlight because it was a very rainy day. You can see the rain on his fur. And maybe if I want it more directional, I could click the radial filter. So I'm clicking here. I'll show again, create new mask. I'll click a radial gradient. And you can drag it in however kind of direction you want. Maybe I'll expand it just a little bit like this. And if I press O on my keyboard, it's showing what's hitting. For now, we're just going to add some light like this. What I don't like is how this is a bit messy. So what I could do is just drag a gradient there, and maybe I just detexture, declarity, and maybe dehaze. And as you can see now, we're kind of giving this a very dreamy effect. If I full screen it, you can kind of see now we've given it light, some energy. It looks like a completely different photo to this, which maybe I could have shot with my phone. I don't know. It's giving it a really different vibe. And the last thing I want to do here now is probably touch on these eyes to give it some more oomph. So I'm going to just very haphazardly brush there. I just pressed K on my keyboard, by the way, and I'm going to boost the exposure. And I can mimic that maybe just on the other eye, just so it doesn't look weird if I don't do it on both eyes. I'm going to increase the temperature just because his eyes were this kind of browny color, but because it's a raw file, it doesn't really pick up all the data that you want. So we don't want to go too far on the color there. We don't want to make him kind of which when we zoom out, it might look a bit artificial. So we can just click them there and maybe dip the exposure just a touch and the color. But now He's looking kind of more alive than with this base image. And I think there, there's a bunch of different things you could do. You could clean up his fur somewhat more, but I think it's looking pretty nice. What you could even do is you could click the lens blur tool. Say you don't have a lens with a bigger depth of field as this, you can click lens blur and click apply, and it will analyze the image and find the subject. And then what it tries to do is it tries to blur anything other than the subject in a kind of pleasing way to the eye. So if I shift the blur up and down, essentially what it's doing is it's blowing out this background, and you can adjust which parts of the image are being blurred here. And if I do that, it's catching just to the back ear there, but I think it looks at just maybe a touch more depth, but it didn't really need it anyway because the lens is already doing pretty good work. But it's just a little tool that you can implement in your edits if you need some more background separation. I'm going to dive into the next image now, and we have this photo of Tokyo. I waited the whole week for this to be in the rain because it was a spot that I'd always wanted to shoot. And I think it just gives it a bit more atmosphere when you shoot in these kind of conditions. I'll just check what settings I used for this one. So I did have to shoot at high ISO. So that means essentially the camera is pushing the exposure in camera to give you as much information as possible, but that will bring about electronic noise, which is what we're going to see here in the sky. You can see this kind of grainy noise, and we can get rid of that. We can alleviate that through some techniques. And what I also want to do is show a couple of other tools. Will make this image a bit more cyberpunky, perhaps, and just make it a bit more interesting. So first thing I might do is just might boost the exposure and then dip the highlights. Do you see now if I zoom in on here, if I dip the highlights, now the text becomes visible. So that's really important because it's given this whole image like a whole different feeling if we now have kind of a we can see everything clearly and everything's not getting blown out. The reason that the highlights are blown because the rest of the image is very dark, but these lights are very bright. So the camera's trying to manage that, but we can just fix that because there's so much data there. We can fix that with just the highlight tool there. I might boost the blacks just a little bit, pull the clarity down a touch just to sort of smooth off some edges there. We can head into the color mixer now. And what I want to do is maybe go for kind of a blue orange offset. They're complementary colors. We've already got a bit of blue, a bit of orange, but I don't really like the yellowy greens so much here. So we can try and kind of boost the oranges, shift the hues somewhat more orange, and then we'll take out the greens because I don't like the greens there. It looks a bit yucky down here. The sign doesn't really appeal. We can shift the color, the green hue, and then dip the saturation, and then we can play with the luminance to our heart's content and just see what looks good. So already we're getting like a different feel here. It might even be a case of just shifting the white balance as well, just to give it a bit more of a blue feel. We could have done that in the field, but it's just as easy to do it in Lightroom after the fact. If you are in the field, when I say that, if you're on location, changing your white balance can sometimes help because it gives you a more accurate idea of how your edit might look. And if you're in, I don't know, fluorescent lighting, it's definitely important to have the right white balance because otherwise everything is just always so orange. So that's quite an important point. And then with these oranges, I might actually just boost them up. You can see now we're getting this beautiful, really nice light coming through down here in the image because we boosted up those oranges. So already before, this is the before image, and after, we've barely done anything to the photo, but it's already looking quite nice. This bit of sort of lens flare there, we can just get rid of, press Q on the keyboard, and it's gone already. Maybe there's another one up there. We could always get rid of that if we really want. And that one's gone. I'll probably just leave that one there. It kind of gives it an artifact. And then what I might do is darken the sky. This time I'm going to darken the sky. Do you see how it gives it like a kind of nice mood? But it's lacking a bit of color. So I can either boost the temperature to more colder or increase the saturation. And now we've got the really nice kind of moody aesthetic. We've got this woman with the umbrella, of course, and some rainy street there. I might darken the street as well. I don't know if I like that though. It's always a bit of trial and error when you're editing. You can play with things. You don't have to have a perfect vision in mind before you go into the editing the photo. You can uh, just sort of play with it and see what looks best while you're doing it. A couple of things that I might want to change. We've got this sign down here, which doesn't really add anything to the image. I can press Q on the keyboard, and I think this is the case where using this new generative AI tool, it really does help. It's just like a one-click thing. I can click remove, and we just wait a couple of seconds, and it will save you from having to really play with the healing tool. It's basically just continued this pillar, which I think is pretty incredible. I don't know how it does it, but it does. And these kind of yellowy areas down here, I'm not a massive fan of. We can probably shift the white balance cooler or just make it look a bit more orange. Maybe I just crop in actually on that so it doesn't look so weird. Something like this and keep everything centered. So the reason why I use 4x5 grid here is mostly because of Instagram. I'm used to shooting everything fairly centered because when people view on Instagram, you want it to be eye-catching and I think aesthetically pleasing. Things are often center of frame. And that's kind of how I lead my viewer through the image. As you can see, like the road pushing through there and the woman at center of frame. Um, I think this is a great image to show some noise reduction and also a bit of color mixer. I want to give it a bit more of a like a grungy dystopian vibe. We can put some split toning, which is like a color grading, and we can apply it into the shadows, into the midtones, or the highlights. And that essentially means if I put color, it will go shadows here and up here. Midtones will go in kind of like the middle areas, probably in these pebbles. If I start putting color in there, you'll see it's just applying to anything kind of that's not super bright. And then highlights is all the bright whites there. I think the shadows could do with some sort of bluish green there. Give it that like nice filmic look, and then maybe the highlights could use just some yellows there just to give it something a bit more interesting. And now we have this very kind of filmic sci-fi kind of cyberpunk vibe. This was the before of the image, and this is the after. And it took, 5 minutes in Lightroom. I don't know if how much time we've got left. I should probably speed up on these edits, but that's a pretty quick one, I think. Quickly showing you actually the denoise tool. If I zoom in here, you can see all this noise. I can just click this, and over the course of 15 seconds, it's saying essentially it will try and keep the image sharp whilst also uh, getting rid of all this grainy pattern. And some people like to keep it because it's kind of emulating film grain. But I think for most sort of social media work, it's nice to have a fairly clean, non-grainy image. And that's incredible what it did. You can see there the noise pattern before and afterwards, but it's still retaining all these beautiful details. I mean, look, I can zoom in on this text here. You can zoom into the pixel level and it's sharp, which is quite cool. So really awesome there. I'm going to quickly dive into this one. Now we have an image of this night sky that I was talking about from Namibia. It's really an incredible place to see the Milky Way. And again, I can show you a few tricks when you're editing stars. First off, I should of course talk about the settings I use to capture it. Now, if I zoom in really quick, you can see very slightly that these stars have a little trail to them. They're kind of moving somewhat, and that's just the rotation of the Earth. Is as we're rotating, the camera is stationary, and the star as it's exposing, because we're exposing for 20 seconds here. We've got a 20-second exposure. We have a little bit of trailing, but that is for a star photo, that's very sharp because if I go to 25 seconds or 30 seconds on my camera, these trails will be a lot longer. So if you want a very sharp image, you still have to expose for a long time to get as much data as possible, but play with your focal length. If you're at like longer than 14, so 20 millimeters or 24, you're going to have more trailing because it's more zoomed in on the stars, so more rotation. So if you're shooting 12 millimeters or 14, you can shoot up to 20, 25 seconds. Um, so you want a wide aperture lens, so f1.4, 1.8, f2, even f2.8 is fine, and shoot for as long as possible without trailing and manually focus on the stars. Often camera autofocus is so good these days on most things, but stars it still struggles with. I mean, they're light years away, so it's really hard to focus on them. So turn your lens. Often they'll have a switch on it to turn it into manual focus, and then zoom in on the back of the camera screen so you can see the star clearly, and then adjust your focus ring until it's just like a sharp pinpoint. And then you can hopefully you could either tape the focus ring so it doesn't shift while you're shooting multiple images, and then you get these really sharp stars, which is going to be really nice when you're in a place like this. You want to get the technique right because when I was in Iceland, I was telling you about my first ever trip. I had no idea what I was doing shooting stars, and they look cool on the back of the camera, but they're all wonky and long trails and all of that. So it's good to get the technique down. What I'd like to do here is I like to I don't really need to denoise, but I can adjust the masking so that we're just picking up stars rather than all this background noise here. And then I can sharpen. Do you see how all the stars are coming out there without bringing in excess noise? It's an incredible tool because it really helps to just, I don't know if you can see so clearly, but you can really bring out the stars there. And another thing you can do is in the basic panel, you can increase the texture and you can see before and after applying texture. You don't want to go too far like this is obviously crazy, but just a bit, maybe 19 or so, and maybe a bit of clarity there. And the whole image is now very crisp and we've got this beautiful Milky Way. I'm not going to go too heavy into the colors here or anything like that. You can adjust. This is kind of more how you would naturally see it, the night sky, and this is what it would look like because it's a bit more subtle browny black. But I like to edit the image to be kind of a more milky blue because it lends itself to more kind of sci-fi appeal, and I think it just looks cooler. And then you can go different kind of color space. You can go more tealy or more purpley. It's really up to you. That's the beauty of astrophotography. You can kind of color it how you want, and the subject is always pretty much the same apart from your foreground. But you can play with the colors there, and maybe mostly in the color grading. I think it would be in the midtones. We can adjust these just to get a bit more of like a interesting purpley hue there. Not really much more I'd want to do to this photo, to be honest. You could adjust the shadows and things to make it more interesting. The reason I have a person frame there is just to give it a bit more scale to the archway. And having a headlamp is also kind of a really fun technique just to give a bit more interest to the photo. So yeah, that one's pretty much there. Really not much you have to do to astrophotography. This image here is an image from the desert in Saudi Arabia, and it's something I really like because uh, it's an image shot in very bright light, but you can make it into a more atmospheric photo with just a few tools. Again, we're going to probably dive into the gradient filter straight away. We drag in from the left side here, and I'm just going to boost the exposure like this and probably bring it in here. So now we've got this kind of like bright, beautiful light coming in, and it's getting rid of a lot of that blue, which I felt is just a bit boring. I should crop here actually before we go any further. So the reason I chose this crop is we have a bit of foreground. I would prefer a little bit more actually. But unfortunately, the lens isn't quite wide enough. But I don't want to cut off this very top half here because we want to. If I did that, I think it just would look a bit off. Do you see how this is cut off? So think about cropping, it's not really a tool as such, but it's such a useful technique to get the right composition. You want to try and get a rule of thirds. There's more of a third in frame here, let's say, because we have this top half of the sky, we have the Milky Way, and then we have this third down here. We have the road down here, the building, and then the sky up there. So rule of thirds. And then here we've kind of got a rule of thirds. We have a bit of sky, this main subject area, and then the foreground. What I want to do maybe is darken this foreground just to sort of lead the viewer in, something like this. But I don't like this distracting element in the bottom left here. So let's see if AI can remove that. Um, and then we'll kind of continue the edit. Maybe go for a very okay, well, that was pretty good. It did a very good job. And we can darken that some more now. And then maybe we add some more light, like coming through from the left here. Just a touch. Like, do you see this now? Instead of this kind of boring, like lights coming from top down, it's now this really a wash with a glow, kind of like almost a sunset glow. And then we can go into some editing steps. So I'm going to add some contrast. You can see gets this nice and sort of crunchy. Push up the shadows just a bit, just so there's some more light there. And then the blacks are just a little heavy. And what this is doing is just in these very dark areas here, I'll just pull the crop out a little bit. You can see it's just raising some of those really deep shadows so we have a bit more light to the photo. I don't need to touch the clarity and texture really here. You might want to increase the vibrance. That's essentially adjusting color in the image where it's lacking. It's not like the primaries colors in the image, so it's kind of pulling out some color there for us. Um, what I might do here is jump into the color mixer. We want to boost these oranges and maybe make them a bit more reddy, a bit more like Martian-y. Not too much, just a little bit. You see there, pulling the luminance down really changes this image. We're losing a lot of detail here, but as soon as we pull this down, we get this nice kind of deep orange color there. And then the only other color really is probably yellows and greens. I don't really see much going on here. And then it's this kind of purpley blue that we're seeing come through there. I think you can see me when I remove that color, these rocks are changing a lot. But I don't like this pink. I prefer like a red. So I'm going to shift. You see, if I shift all the way that way, you have pink. All the way this way is red. So I want my rocks to be very red. So I'll just leave them red like that. And then if there's any purples, you can see in the back there that that's being affected heavily. So I will also want to make that a bit more red just to match the rest of the image. And then maybe desaturate that one because it's just looking a bit weird with the pinks. Don't like it. The blue in the image is mostly just in the sky, which we've kind of washed out, but we can see here by adjusting the saturation, there's some bluey purples there, so we can just get rid of those and match. We're trying to tonally match the rest of the photo. And then we can darken that luminance there just so much that there's a bit of shadow in each of these crevasses. And now we have kind of a more balanced image, but also the light is nicely coming in from the side there. And that's pretty much all I would want to do here. Maybe just play with the saturation just some more and adjust the light so it's a bit glowy like that. And you can see here that's edited, and these bushes down here could add just a little something. If you think the image needs something, let's try and grab them. We push the exposure, maybe make them a bit more green with that tint there. Do you see I'm using this tint slider? I can make them green, increase the saturation. I don't like that yellow look, so maybe I move the white balance a bit like that. We don't want it too high. But that just adds like a very small something to the image. I wish they were perhaps a little bit bigger. I could maybe use generative AI just to add a couple more down here, but it adds a bit of a complementary color, which is quite nice to the image. I'll do a before and after. So you can see it looks quite different now. We've only spent 2 or 3 minutes adjusting colors. And you can see down here, I just really like that addition of the green there in the plants. It just offsets that kind of deep orange. what I'm noticing also I wanted to touch on is having this person here. Um, Hopefully, you guys get to travel with someone who can uh, run off into the distance for you and stand there for 5 minutes while you take photos because it really adds a sense of scale. Like if I didn't have this person here, like if I just do a quick heel tool, it looks a lot more boring. You don't know how big this thing is. Is this a little rock like the size of just like something by the side of the road, or is it a big, massive mountain with a human for scale? So having a human element is sometimes just really important. So yeah, diving into the next image, the reason I chose this because it's it looks terrible. It looks just like nothing a photo, but it's important to let the camera uh, retain detail. And by that, I mean if you're shooting directly into the sun, this is Mount Fuji in the background there. You have the sun behind, it's just like cresting. You can see up here, it's cresting that pagoda. Uh, you want to maintain detail in the lights and the highlights. So this if I push the highlights here now, you want to retain the detail there. So if I pull that back, you now got a lot of still detail in the sky there. If I pull that out, but then also your shadows, because cameras these days are so crazy good at retaining shadow detail, you can pull it out. You can open the shadows up, and now you have a somewhat balanced image. It's almost like you shot a three bracket image, highlight, dark, shadow, but in one shot, because cameras these days are so capable. So you know, make sure to expose for the sky. That's what I say, and then you can just lift the shadows how you want. I'm going to add some contrast, and here it feels very raw. There's not so many dominating colors, and I'd love to just add a bit more to the image. I'm not liking these blues that are coming out, but I'm going to keep adding saturation until these nice deep reds are coming through with the pagoda, with the autumn leaves, which is beautiful. And then we can deal with the blues in the color mixer. So instantly, I'm just going to pull away some of the blues. I'm going to keep some. Like if I remove completely, it's going to look weird. Like why is there no blue in the image? But if I add too much, I mean, you might see some people they go crazy on all the colors, and then you have too much. It's like too much going on. So I'm going to pull that out to somewhat like a more balanced color, and then maybe just make it just slightly on the teal side, and then you can change the luminance to however you want. So you could have like a slightly dark sky there. Do you see now? I mean, it's instantly so different, and I have barely done anything. I've increased the saturation, I've increased the shadows, and this is just showing, two things: the capability of cameras these days, and also editing software and what we can do to transform an image. So it's really important just to get a basic grasp on some of the tools that you can use, and then you can just play with it as much as you like while keeping things pretty balanced. Um, I'm going to just reduce some of the blues, some more, and then increase the lights there. And what you could do here is maybe add a radial filter just to, let's do like a radial gradient around like the sky there, just as if it's like a sunburst. So we're just getting some warmth. You see how like that warmth is coming through now into the sky? So it's like hitting the clouds almost, which is really nice. And then maybe if you want it more pink, like a more pinkish sunset, you could, it's kind of looking a bit artificial if I do that. So I'm just going to leave it like a warm sunburst like that. I mean, you're not really being dishonest with this because the raw image is going to look very neutral. I shoot a very flat profile. So these colors are there, like the red in the trees, the red in the pagoda, the sunset was there. It's just the camera doesn't often pick up colors super accurately. So you want to kind of mimic that and breathe life into the photo. So going back to this image here, you think if you shot that on the back of your camera, you'd think, oh, I'm going to just throw that away. It's just a nothing image. I mean, you can barely see Fuji and everything's in shadow, but just a couple of button presses and now, you've got yourself a desktop wallpaper. So I think playing with photos is a great thing, and I think leads me to this next image. Um, Debris, I don't know if I'm going over time here or under time, but just let me know if I'm going over. I think this one here is just a case of adjusting the sky and the brightness of the photo. It looks kind of very neutral, very washed out. We have a couple of people here. I had no idea who they were. They were just standing on this precipice in the Dolomites. And it was just a really cool moment. So I just got out my camera and captured it. I mean, it's a pretty cool place. It's on the way to Tre Chime, the hike up there. It's just outside the car park. You walk for like 30, 40 minutes. So if you're ever in the Italian Dolomites, this is like a must-do location, and it's pretty simple to do. And you can fly your drone everywhere around here. It's awesome. Um, what I'm looking at this image is it needs a bit more contrast, a bit more color, uh, maybe something to do in the sky because it's it's just lacking depth. So I'm going to darken it, bring it back to kind of a normal exposure because it was maybe my fault in the field for overexposing. And then we can bring down the shadows, bring down the blacks, and now we got a bit more crunchy image. I'm not liking too much shadow down here. And then what we can do is maybe just uh, let's get this radial filter. I just press K on my keyboard, brush in on these kind of light patches. And what I want to do is add some warmth and contrast. And you see what that's doing is adding like we got this sunset glow on the mountains, which is quite cool. Add some more contrast. Maybe what I would do is decrease the clarity, make it a bit more dreamy, but then go into the detail pane and make sure we're sharpening those edges. Because look how detailed, these edges are so crispy because we add that sharpening in. What you can do is you can press new mask, you can select the sky, and we can now do direct adjustments on this area of the image only. So what I want to do is darken the sky. Do you see how that's bringing more detail in? Darken the contrast, darken the highlights, maybe some blacks. And now we have it looks a bit like a Windows wallpaper. I don't really like the blues. So we have to go into our color channels now and get the colors looking sort of more balanced. We want maybe a slightly blue, slightly orange look, or we could go green, orange, green, blue. So diving into this color mixer, we can adjust those blues. They're too much, but we can pull them out somewhat like this, and maybe a bit more tealy, something like that. Then the yellows, you see how that's bringing in this beautiful kind of washed light coming in there. And then the oranges, of course, is probably going to affect here and also the mountains. So if I boost that orange there, you can see this glows coming through now, which is really awesome. And then now this bit down here, you can either have it kind of this deep orange glow, or I can brush in on it like this area here. I can make it more green, shift the white balance. So when you want to adjust a color to something different, like the opposite of it, if it's looking too warm, you want it colder, I'm going to adjust the temperature and the tint. So the tint more green, look, with the tint, I go more green, and then the temperature, I go more blue, more colder, and that just adjusts this so it's not so orange and artificial looking. I'm not sure I like this thing in the bottom right corner, actually. I hadn't noticed that before. I tried the AI tool. Let's just remove that. And overall, it's looking like a bit more interesting. It's got more depth. It's got more color. It's not as flat. And we have this centralized subject again, which is really awesome. And let's have a look at it pre-edit. We've got a very bright, washed out image with not much detail. We've brought back some of those clouds in the sky. We have this beautiful kind of moody orange glow there. We could even, again, add a radial gradient. Let's do something like this. And let's do something maybe like orange coming in and some light coming in, maybe highlights down. And then what we could do is scroll all the way down to dehaze, and that adds kind of like a foggy haze coming in. And then maybe I go temperature up, and you can just play around as much as you want with this and move it around. Like you got some glow coming in, hitting here, uh, and it really does transform the photo into like a whole different kind of image. As you can see, a little tool tip is you press F on your keyboard and it full screens it and it loads it in like a kind of really high res version so you can see everything in detail. But I think that turned out pretty well for like a 5 minuter. Um, Two more images if we got time. I'll jump into this one quick just to show you how I would edit this droney of Tindholmer and maybe some localized adjustments. So the first thing I noticed here was the horizon wasn't straight. So that's always something you should be aware of when you're editing and posting photos is always try and keep that level because it's something really off-putting if maybe you accidentally didn't notice it and then everyone else notices it. It's kind of annoying. Um, I'm going to just get rid of these distractions. Click here, quickly click here, and you can see just kind of gets rid of things straight away. Even this little bit of snow looks out of place here. So I just get rid of that. Like it doesn't need to be there. And now we have a clean image. You can see before and after, very quick adjustments. I'm going to darken this foreground, probably maybe bring in a crop. I'm going to darken the sky. We want a really nice mood to the Faroes because everyone thinks about the Faroe Islands as this kind of moody, northern, kind of grungy place with inclement weather, which is kind of true, but sometimes you just got to make it a bit more moody. So something like that, and then add some contrast. And then I'm going to do some vibrance. So we're going to make the whole image just a little bit more colorful. Now we can go into our color mixer, and this is where the magic happens. We turn our blues down just a touch, maybe darken them like that. And we can see this purple banding in the sky. Sometimes in the skies, you'll get, especially at sunset, you'll get like a color banding. So I'm going to shift it more towards blue so it's matching the rest of the blue in the image. And the same with the magentas there. And then we'll just adjust the luminance. Look, if you go too far, it looks kind of weird. So you just adjust that luminance so it's matching. And now we can do what we want with the blues there, something like this. And the last colors for this photo is going to be the yellows, greens, and oranges. So I want a nice blue orange, kind of like bluey teal effect for this image. So greens isn't really doing anything. It's going to be the yellows and oranges. So you can see now if I shift the yellows, it's going to be dramatically changing the color of that Tindholmer. And I want it a bit more orange, kind of like autumnal color here. And then orange is here as well. We can just adjust a bit more ready. And then what we're going to do is radial brush. It's a really useful tool, this. We just brush. I'm doing it so quickly because I've got this auto mask feature on. And this allows us to sort of brush quickly like this, or let me see like this, and it will pick up the edges of things. You can see it's not going into the sky because I've got the auto mask on. And then what I want to do is just increase the brightness there, and I can do the same with this here, and maybe even this, and just giving it just some light, breathing some light into that. And then maybe I want to darken this some more. And then we can pretend then, because this area is now brighter, we have to sort of match that on our heads. Like, where's the light coming from? And the light is coming from this right side because it's lit from there. So we can kind of have this light coming in there. I think the whole image just looks a bit flat right now. So I'm going to increase the contrast. And now you get this really nice kind of moody effect. What I am noticing is the whole image does look just a little purple, and I need to just shift it, the tint somewhat like this, and there we go. It's a lot more interesting than this kind of washed out white, like no color. That's because it's raw. To this now, we've got our classic shot of Tindholmer. Um, really one of my favorite places in the Faroe Islands. And I think that's it for this one. Doesn't really need, you don't need to over edit, nothing really much more to do there. And then I just wanted to finish up with a portrait just because some of you might only shoot portraits and not landscapes. So let's dive into this image. We'll crop it down So she's center of frame. And the way I shot this is to have a slightly slower shutter speed. You got 1/80th of a second. So for portraits, you kind of want to shoot fairly quick shutter speed because you want a sharp image. You want if the model's posing, moving around, you're going to want to have a sharp photo. But uh, this image here, I wanted the train to be kind of in motion. We've got this kind of blurry effect back there. So we shot it slightly slow shutter, but she's still sharp in frame there. We got a pretty sharp image there. And I want to give it a bit more of a kind of grungy urban feel. We'll maybe decrease the white balance there, maybe make it a bit more kind of tint, a bit more green. So now it's got this kind of matrixy kind of urban feel. I can shift the highlights down and the shadows up, and then maybe the whites down. So we're kind of just balancing out the photo here. Nothing too much has been done, and maybe just leave the blacks how they are. I like to de-clarity portraits because they're a bit more soft. Helps to smooth the skin out a bit as well. The thing is with portraits is you can't really adjust skin tones. Look, as soon as you adjust like I mean saturation of the oranges and yellows, it's going to go crazy. So you just want to do small adjustments, especially around the yellows, the reds, those kind of things, unless you do local adjustments. So I could do a mask selection on the reds there, back there, and I could desaturate those whilst keeping the reds of her lips nice and red. Something I like to do with portraits is I like to do a vignette. It helps to kind of focus your attention on the person. Um, Normally, what I do is maybe smooth out the skin a little bit, but I don't really like to go overboard with that. I do like, actually, I'm gonna get the whole eye here. I do like just a like the same with wildlife is I just push the exposure just a touch, and then she has brown eyes, so you want to just boost the exposure here of the shadows and just a saturation. Okay. And now there's just a bit more detail there in the eyes. Um, and then we can just maybe dive into color grading here just to kind of finish it up. We could always also just darken out that top half there because that's not really adding anything to the image, that kind of area. So we want to focus our attention in the center of frame. I would get rid of this as well. Now, I would probably just play with these color grading tools until it gives it the effect I want. So like if I'm going filmic, we could have like a kind of warm-ish highlight, shadow, sorry, and then a cool highlight just to give it something different, something interesting. Maybe play with the midtones here. Do you see how this, oh, I didn't mean to click that. This area of the image is now looking a bit more kind of faded blue. If I get rid of color grading completely, you can kind of see the difference before and after in those colors there. Not too much, but it just adds some kind of filmic effect there by going before and after. What I want to do there is add some grain because we're giving it a filmic look. That's going to be inspired by shooting on film, so we want to add that manually in. Usually it's going to be around 40. You can see now in the with and without grain, it kind of gives it texture, and you're only really going to notice that when you kind of zoom in on the photo, but it's a subtle effect which just helps to kind of lend itself to the idea that you're shooting in that style. So a quick before and after, very bright image, not much kind of color balance to it. It's just a raw file. Here now we've gone for that very matrixy, grungy vibe. If we wanted more of like a natural look, we could change the tint back somewhat and maybe warm it up a bit. But I kind of like it fairly neutral as well. So yeah, I think that's me done with my little editing session. As you can see, it doesn't really require too much. You don't need to spend hours on a photo. If you over edit, it can somewhat ruin an image. So sometimes just edit for a brief time and take a step back and look at the image and think, Does it look natural? If it doesn't look natural, then maybe unless that's the style you're going for, it's maybe not best. You want to kind of make it believable. So this image here, it is basically a real sunset. I've just amplified it somewhat, and the colors don't look completely unreal. So yeah, I think that's very important. And also, I want to dive back to the presentation, and we kind of go into the Q&A here, and after the Q&A, I've included the raw files for our editing, which is going to be available at this link, along with a couple of my presets. So take a photo of this link, copy it, write it down, or just remember it, and you can download them. And for personal use, you can use them how you wish, and maybe just try editing yourself, and you can maybe learn a few of the tricks that I went through just now. So yeah, we'll dive into a Q&A. I'll stop sharing my screen, and yeah, I think, Dabria, do you want to
Yeah, let's kick this
ask
off.
away?
Actually, I wish you hadn't stopped sharing your screen because there are a couple of questions about editing. One of
Okay, I can
them,
I can go back into it.
yeah, I think the last photo you edited is most
Yeah.
relevant because it says, when you take portraits, how do you keep skin tones natural?
Um, so I guess start by camera settings. Just make sure you're shooting in nice light. I think backlit can be fun, but if you're front lit, you're just gonna everything's gonna be even, and not gonna have kind of weird artifacts or weird color balance. But when you're editing, that is important that you don't mess too much with those oranges and yellows. The other colors aren't so much of a problem, but don't really adjust the luminance or saturation of oranges and yellows. Use the color channels, so the color grading tools that I talked about, the midtones, shadows, and highlights. You can use those to make your sort of macro adjustments. If the skin just needs a bit more warmth or isn't looking colorful enough, then yeah, you can boost saturation in the yellows.
Great. Another question was, is there a good trick to help fix color noise, not necessarily in dark spaces?
Yeah, let me just jump back into Lightroom and have a quick look at that, because there is a manual noise. If I share my screen again, it might help. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll go back into the Lightroom. Can you see it now?
Yep.
And now we have this little, if I go into this image here, I don't think there's really any noise there. There's not really noise left. The color, you can click this manual noise reduction tab, and that allows you to adjust your color noise reduction here. So uh, you can basically do it yourself. The AI tool is pretty good at denoising and getting rid of the right amount of noise. But if you did want to actually adjust color noise, there is a tool there for it. I don't really use it myself. I haven't really noticed too much color noise in any of the Sony images. I don't know what camera the question it relates to, but I don't think it's a big issue we see these days. It's mostly shooting high ISO that we might notice it, but yeah, for most things, I think we're pretty good.
Another one that's kind of in the same vein. When you shoot at night, do you struggle with grain? How do you manage the grainy look in darker photos?
For starters, I think sometimes you can just play with it and utilize that grain to give it a texture. I mean, people understand that if you shoot at night, you're gonna have it's not going to be perfect, but there's both in-camera settings or gear, and then there's post-processing. So shooting at night, or shooting, even if I'm capturing wildlife as the sun is setting, most people would want to capture, the moment you want to freeze the frame, so you shoot a high shutter speed, and that would then mean you'd have to shoot a high ISO. But you can limit this by pulling down your ISO and pulling down your shutter speed. you'd have a longer exposure, so more prone to movement and things like that, and shaky hands. But if you have a stationary animal, and this is what I like to do when I shoot animals, is I'll capture my high ISO images, my motion, all of that kind of thing, but I don't really like grain either. So I steady my camera, I wait for the animal to be still, or my subject if I'm shooting at night, and I lower my shutter speed manually so that I am not shooting those high ISO environments. And also lowering your f-stop, using a lens like a 50 1.2 or a 20 1.8 or something like that, where you have a lot of light getting into the lens can help. And then, yeah, if you're stuck with a noisy image, um, you can use the noise reduction tool. You can then use something like Topaz Denoiser. I never used it myself, but people rave about it. There's so many tools these days out there that can turn like a really grainy photo into something that looks like it was shot in the daytime. I think it's not really too much of a worry, especially for me these days.
Nice. We have a couple of questions that are more about your specific editing style. This one
Yeah.
says, there are so many directions you can take stylistically. Your work is pretty moody. What made you choose that style? Was it intentional from the start or something that evolved?
Good question. I guess initially it was because I was always shooting at night in London after work. But I think that's just the way I view uh, art is I like that kind of more cinematic style. Um, it's very hard for me to go to like a tropical place and a beach and like get creative because I just find anything with atmosphere and dark, moody clouds to be more appealing, and I find it easier to shoot there as well because the light isn't as demanding. Um, and also, often the most rugged places that I go to are very moody, like mountains. They lend themselves to more inclement weather and deserts even. But you're right. There isn't really I don't think there was really a moment that I was like, oh, I'm always going to want to shoot moody images. And for client work, I have to shoot very happy, bright images as well. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just my personality.
That's funny. Another person asked, how do you define the boundary between natural and artificial editing? Social media often boosts colors and moods, creating expectations that reality can't always meet.
It's a good point, and I think we have a certain responsibility to not like overdo the way we show these places. A lot of people's they see images online and they go there and they're like, okay, this doesn't look anything like the images I've seen. But also, it's responsibility of artists to kind of give places or their art or their images their emotion and give it some of their own style. So if everyone just went to the same place and captured a basic JPEG and didn't edit it, there would no one could be creative. So I think um, there's a nice balance you can have with creating an atmospheric image or something that tells a story with your editing and making it look colorful and or moody or whatever, but also not going overboard. And then there's another obvious point about utilizing AI in the work. I mean, I don't ever use Gen AI where I'm like making a mountain or anything like that. I use it to like remove objects like people in the way and things like that. Um, I think in the future we're going to have more and more of that kind of AI creativity and but there's always going to be a demand for like realistic and real life images and showing the beauty of our world, I think. So I think it's about finding a balance.
Yeah, and I also really liked what you said a little bit earlier when you were editing about having a human element in your photos. I think, having that is very crucial as well. You can have that creativity, but still feel realistic with the human
Yeah,
elements.
exactly.
We do have a few more questions. I'm
Yeah.
going to pick one more to close out since we are a little bit over. They asked, do you use your own presets or do you have other tricks to keep your edits so consistent? Thanks a lot for sharing your skills.
Yeah, I have my presets. I have plenty of them. And I also kind of when I go into a shoot, I try and start with a preset of mine, but then I'll kind of adjust the first image to kind of match the mood that I want to create from those photos, that series. And then I can kind of you can essentially sync that color scheme across all the photos throughout the image series that you shot, and then adjust as you see fit, which saves a lot of time because you can keep consistency there through an image series while without having to kind of reapply a preset to every single image that you go through. But at the same time, how do I keep those images from a new place consistent with the rest of my portfolio? Um, it's kind of keeping the same tone curve and visually just matching it, like using a reference image or bringing up, having Instagram on your phone and thinking, will this really match my style? And after so many years of doing it, I kind of have it in my head, like what it's going to look like is it's going to fit with my aesthetic. But I think if you're trying to if you're starting out or you're just trying to get your own style in mind, you can make grids, you can have a preview app, and you can bring up images and put them together in a grid and balance these yourself and balance the aesthetic and then re-export the image and just make sure everything aligns and keep things consistent.
Awesome. I will ask one more question because someone really wants me to
Yeah, yeah,
ask
of
it.
course.
So this is
Yeah.
going to be the last question. How do you expose? Do you expose to the right, or how would your histogram look when taking the photo? I know it depends on what you shoot, but just to understand how you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably always taught that you should have the histogram up and view all the info and things like that when you're shooting. But I think with modern EVFs now, we don't really need to worry too much about viewing histogram after the image is shot. We can basically shoot underexposed because we're less likely to lose detail in the shadows than the highlights in modern cameras. I mean, that's the way I've found it. If we overexpose, the sky is always going to be gone. You're never going to recover it. But like I showed you in that image of Schroeter Pagoda in Mount Fuji, there's so much detail there in the shadows, even when you underexpose massively, that I would lean towards maybe zero point 0.3 underexposure, and that's typically how I shoot. There's exceptions, but yeah, for the most part, I would underexpose or just expose neutrally, and let the camera do the hard work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise,
That's all
Luke.
right.
I think this has been a
You're
wonderful
welcome.
session. Like I mentioned, there
I'm
were a
glad to hear
couple
it.
of questions that we didn't get around to, so I'll see if we can answer them separately, and then get
Sure.
those posted on the Lexar
If they
website.
have them, if they don't get an answer, they can message me and I'll try and get back to them.
Okay, perfect. This will be available for replay, so if anyone missed out on the earlier part of this workshop, feel free to come back to our YouTube channel and watch the replay. I mentioned this at the start of the workshop, but this is part of our virtual workshop series at Lexar, where we bring education from our elites and ambassadors to the community. So if you're interested in more education, do check out some of the other episodes on our YouTube channel.
Thanks, Deborah, and I'll thank everyone for joining, and I hope you learned something useful from me.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye,
All
everyone.
right, bye.